All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is CareerNub's data science mentoring session. Thank you again for joining this session. Today, we have a dear friend and one of the strongest data scientists that I've worked with, Chinmay. Chinmay has a tremendous work experience. He's done masters in statistics in 2013 and has been working in the industry and data science in different companies in the Silicon Valley for the past 7 years or so. So thank you so much, Chinmay, for speaking with us and giving this talk. I'll open the session for you. If you want to do a quick introduction, that would be a great start.
Thanks, Utsav. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the kind words, Utsav. Mostly I'm excited to meet everybody and talk about my experience and hopefully help some of you or all of you decide what you want to do in your careers or answer any pressing questions that you might have and generally just share my experience.
Great. So do you want to quickly talk about your background, your personal journey?
Yeah, let's do that. I'll go all the way back to my undergrad. So when you're in India, you don't really know much about like what are the different choices that you have in terms of what you want to do. At least at that time in 2008, 2009, I didn't really know enough about statistics or data science. All I knew is that I liked mathematics, and everybody told me that you should do engineering, which is what I ended up doing. Fortunately for me, the university that I went to in India had this concept of electives, where I could choose to do as many electives which are not like IT or computer science electives. And I ended up doing a bunch of math or stats electives. And I remember in my third year, I had a couple of courses related to neural networks and stochastic simulation, which is essentially probability and statistics. That got me really interested in the idea of statistics, which is when I decided that this is probably something that I want to do. Learned more about the idea of what I don't think the word data science was big back then, 2011 or 2012, but the idea of what you can do with data analytics that had been around for like decades at that point. So that's when I decided that I want to do my master's in statistics. At that time, I also really wanted to get into finance. So I was very curious about statistics and how finance fits into that. And fortunately, I was able to get into a good grad school in the US. I went to University of Michigan, and I did my master's in statistics over there. The course has since been rebranded, I think 2 or 3 times. Now it's called Masters in Data Science, to keep up with the terminology, I guess. In Michigan, I got a chance to do a bunch of different electives as well. I think a common thread across my career is that I like to do not only data and statistics, I like to learn about different things as well, which I think is good for a data scientist like myself who wants to be a generalist and learn more about different areas. After I finished my master's in statistics, I was in Chicago at this company called TransUnion, which is one of the three big credit bureaus in the United States. I did financial predictive analytics and risk and response modeling for them for a year and a half, 2 years. And then in 2017, I think I moved to the Bay Area to start work at Uber. At Uber, as part of
All right. I'll probably just going to pause because there's so much information there to unpack. So, all right. So you went to the US to do your MS in statistics, and I think even in 2012 or 2013, like all of the data scientists were just called statisticians, and you had statisticians, like the role was called statisticians back then. So how did you pick the college that you were going to do and the kind of course that you were going to do? I think a lot of people in the audience would love to know about how did you pick the college and how did you pick that course?
There are a number of factors that go into it, and if for a bunch of reasons, the choice can get really personal, right? I think one or two big things that were personal for me was that I was obviously on a budget, right? Certain grad schools can get like really, really uh, expensive, and that was not something that I wanted to do. And so that was one criteria. So once I have that big criteria, then I can start filtering out based on interests. Like I said, one of my core interests was in finance, and University of Michigan had this idea. University of Michigan had this, Johns Hopkins had this, and if I remember, there's one or two, like Berkeley had this. Berkeley I didn't get into, and then there's another university that had this idea that you could, while doing a master's in statistics, you will have to take a few courses in the department. I think half of the courses have to be in the department, but the other five can actually be any like you could do courses on the engineering campus, you could do courses in the business school, etc. So that was something that was attractive to me, which is why University of Michigan was one of my top choices. Um, Generally speaking, I know friends and colleagues who have also been very particular about what they want. I know few people who are really, really interested in natural language processing. So the universities that they pick over there in their for their career are universities where they can work with a professor who's well renowned in that field. So if there's a particular topic that really interests you, you can always find information about what sort of professors or what sort of industry connections are there with that particular university that can help you succeed in that domain, which would be nice. For me, I'm more of a generalist, which is why I was biasing more towards let's try to do as much as I can across different fields like finance, NLP, ML, stats, all of the stuff.
Got it. That makes sense. And I think over the years, the amount of courses that have come up, I think when you applied, there probably were 5 universities which offered a data science sort of statistics course, but probably there are 30 more universities which are offering right now. But those are great input attributes. So you talked about like if you're interested in a particular field within data science, that's great, and you can look at the professors and the research that they have done to apply. And one of the earlier things that you filtered was on the kind of budget that you're on, and probably the other input would be also be like the kind of core, the kind of score that you have on your GRE, which probably helps you filter more on the colleges as well.
Also always personal factors, right? Like, do you have family close by, all of that stuff. What I found out is that every step in my career has helped me get to the next step, but nobody really, like right now when I'm applying for a job after having worked at a couple of like TransUnion and Uber and now Reddit, it doesn't really matter where I went to grad school, but it
Mhm.
does matter in terms of the fact that it got me a role in TransUnion. Working at TransUnion does matter that it got me to Uber. So in a way it matters, but picking a university, the in my personal opinion, the prestige, as you go along in your career, the prestige doesn't matter as much. Other things start mattering more.
Got it. So probably it's also a last touch point model that follows in success. Like the attribution is more towards the last touch that you have. But yeah, great point. So tell us a bit about how did you transition from your master's in getting through that first role or the first job, because that's one of the things that at least the grads in 2020 or 2021 would be struggling a lot, and especially like what sort of internships did you do then, and how does one go about those things?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think that was one of the biggest learning experiences for me because I did not start looking for an internship till way later, right? I did not understand that, especially in grad school, one of the main things that you got to start doing as soon as you start is networking and connecting with people and connecting with companies, because referral based job search really works well. Like if there is somebody who knows you and can um, tell the hiring manager that okay, this person or the company that this person has this skill set that you can hire for, it becomes easier for the hiring managers to make a call over there. So one of the mistakes that I made is that my course I think started in August, and I did not start looking for an internship till February, and internship start in May and June, etc. Uh,
Mhm.
so it was tough for me, but I was fortunate enough to basically, like, I had narrowed down the field. I knew I wanted to do finance, so I knew that I had to get into financial statistics. So I got into like this firm called Argus, which did like credit card analytics, which is
Mhm.
funny, and like did interesting modeling problems. But the learning lesson here is that, a, keep all your options open, right? Like, for me, it's fine and good that I knew that I wanted to get in finance, but internships don't really dictate what you're going to do for the rest of your career. So it's more important to get experience, and more important to like start thinking about your internships or your first jobs in the very beginning of your grad school life or your undergrad life, if you want to do a job after your undergrad.
Got it. That makes sense. I think a lot of students do get into like the analysis paralysis mode where they keep trying to think about, hey, this is what I'm going to do, or this is where I fit in, like you mentioned finance. But the real world scenario is very, very different. It's a lot based on the kind of demand and supply there is at that point of time, and the kind of opportunities there are. So great point. So tell us more about your first role and how was quant, like you did hardcore quant at a and I think there was a fintech company, right? The
Yes,
first one.
an internship, 3-month internship at a fintech company. The biggest shock that you get is that data is not clean, right? Like when you're studying in grad school, you get these nice data sets. Well, not super nice, but you get nice data sets where everything's labeled, everything works, etc. When you're working at a fintech company, especially at Argus, Argus collected data from their partners. So
Mhm.
this entire data pipeline, that is very, very important in terms of where is your data coming from and how much bias is there in the data. So I remember one of the first analysis that I did, and I like showed people that, hey, here's what we should do. I don't remember the exact things, but the first couple of things that my mentor said was like, okay, because this particular company collects data in a particular manner, we should think about the bias that is adding in. So one of the first one big lesson to learn there is that when you're working in industry, the data collection process itself can be biased, right? And when you're making suggestions or recommendations, while they might be true, it's important to caveat them that, okay, it is based on the data collection process that we've done. That's one thing. The other big thing was like how to clean data, right? The idea of I think like there's many words for it, like there's capping, flooring, winsorization, outlier removal, whatever. How important those are in terms of how skewed your data can be, or the outcomes that you can create using your analysis, is something to be very mindful of, especially in a business like finance where the variance can be really, really high for any sort of metric that you look at. I think those were two big things that I learned at my first internship.
Got it. So that brings us to a very, very core and important scale about data extraction and probably descriptive statistics and the entire field around that. I think the coolness around data science is more flashy around predictive modeling and classification and neural networks, and those are amazing things themselves. But I think the first part of the pipeline, what you talked about, like the difference in handling data sets which are available at Kaggle or at your universities or whatnot and actual real world scenarios is very different.
Yeah, and I think it's even a step before that, right? Like when you're working with Kaggle problems, or when you're working with any sort of like well-defined problems, that's thing, that problems are well-defined. You have the Titanic data set and you want to predict something.
Mhm.
In the industry, the problem is a business problem, right? Like, for example, at Uber, where Utsav and I work together, one of the questions that we get asked, or we were asked, was, what is the negative impact of push notifications? Now, that is not a statistical problem. That is a business problem. And the important skill set there becomes that you got to break down a very, well, not very ill, but ill-defined problem to smaller problems and ensure that you have the data collection in place to be able to solve that problem. For example, in the case of what is the negative impact of push notifications, let's say that Utsav and I agree, and we say that, okay, one of the things that we want to measure is how many people are uninstalling the app. If we do not collect data or attribute data uninstalls to push notifications, there is no way we can do that analysis. So data collection also stems a lot from the questions that you're trying to ask, and that is like the first step. So the first step is, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? Then it becomes, what is the data that you're trying to collect? Then it becomes, how do you clean and munch your data in a way that it is analyzable or modelable or whatever you want to do, data scienceable. And then you try to solve that problem, and then you convert your statistical answer back into business terms, that, hey, we are okay, we're not really resulting in a lot of push, there's not a lot of negative impact of push notifications.
Yeah, that's I think a very fun word. Is your data scienceable? I think that's probably a word of the day kind of thing. But yeah, very very important things that you mentioned. I think the push notification, you've solved the or at least tried to solve that issue at Uber together. So yeah, great point. So tell us more about why did you sort of want to move away from a traditional quant background, or where number crunching and analytics is extremely important, to a more product based company where you have more product analytics or more product side data science questions to solve, and how is that switch basically for you?
Yeah. So one of the reasons I wanted to move to a tech, the two or three reasons, but one of the big reasons I wanted to move to a tech company is because I was very enamored by the speed at which stuff happens at tech companies. Like, the decision making that happens in most tech companies, or what I heard from my friends who were in tech and when I wasn't, where they would explain to me that, okay, I did this and there was immediate impact. I think that sort of idea that you're going to be able to generate quick impact, not bigger or smaller impact, just quicker impact, was very exciting to me. At that time, also data science was blowing up. So all these companies in the tech world in Silicon Valley were hiring data, like, they were experts that you get to learn a lot from, which is why I was attracted to moving to tech. Um, the transition, I think, was actually pretty smooth, and I'll tell you why. I think the big reasons are that one of the things that they teach you in finance or or like in consulting or those areas is, how do you think about business outcomes and how do you do storytelling,
Mhm.
right? And those two things, I think across the various roles or various teams that I've been part of, are really important. The thing that we discussed, how do you go from framing a question to a statistical question, and then from a statistical question to a business answer, is very important. The idea of takeaways, that, hey, I've done this, I've built this fancy model which does a great job, but if I'm presenting to an executive, do they really care about the fanciness in the model, how many hidden layers I have in my model, etc.? No, they want to know that because of the model that I build, what is the estimated impact, not in revenue, in any other metric that your model is bringing to the table, and why we should implement it. So because fortunately my manager at my first role, he was great and he was able to like teach me all of these things, my transition became a little bit smoother. And that is why I believe that there are similarities across analytics and data science, and in any field, where as long as you can understand what question you're trying to answer, I think you can figure out using your data skills how to solve that. So that is the simpleness of the transition. It is fine. The complicated things are that you have to then train yourself to work on multiple problems at the same time. You're not really used to, at least I wasn't very used to doing that in my first job, but at Uber, because I was one of the first data scientists on the first team that I worked on, it was very important to be able to juggle things. I made mistakes in terms of like doing a lot and burning out in like the first 10 months, where my manager had to tell me, hey Chinmay, go on a vacation. So there are things that you have to be careful about, and there are things that everybody learns in their career about how to balance work and life, and that's again a very personal decision for people,
Got
right?
it. Great. I think you touched upon a very important topic on like being the first one in the team, or at least the first set of data scientists in the team. I think both on Uber's platform team and in Uber Eats, you were one of the pioneers or one of the first data scientists. Um, and I think it's very important to understand what's the maturity of the problem that you're trying to solve. So if you're first on the team, and probably that's the bit that we want to touch base upon more, is how do you grow, or how do you do more foundational work at the start, and then how do you build on moving to more mature things in the future?
Yeah, I think that's probably the my favorite part about data science, about how you move on from one phase to the other in a team. And there's a very nice article that one of the managers at Uber had written. I can share that with you later, or so that you can share it with everybody.
Yeah.
Uh, but the idea is that when you join a team or a project, right, and when you're trying to solve a problem, so the first team that I was working on at Uber was with respect to customer support platform. So how are agents solving issues that Uber's customers raise? The first question that my product manager and engineering manager asked me were like, how do we measure what we are doing? So unless you can effectively measure your impact on customers or customer experience, doing any sort of projects, be it like UI improvements, design changes, model based improvements, or new product features, is going to be kind of moot, because you're not going to be able to measure whether you did the right thing or the wrong thing. So the first thing that I believe should happen in any team is we got to figure out what are the big metrics that you want to measure as part of your product or as part of your project. After that, the data collection pieces come into being, dashboards come into being, where you're actively tracking these metrics over time. Then you move on to experimentation, figuring out how to run smaller scale experiments. Does the statistical validity still hold? And at the same time, then you can start exploring machine learning and heuristic based stuff. I have a personal bias towards always starting with heuristic based stuff, so that you can prove out whether a particular idea works or not before moving to machine learning. But I know that there are differences in opinions with other data scientists, and as long as you have a good measurement framework and a good experimentation framework, you'll be able to figure out what to do.
Yeah, I think the first part of it was bang on in terms of like how do you measure stuff and what do you measure. For folks who are interested more, there's a great book which is named The Data Detective, and one of the top quotes is that what gets measured gets optimized. So whatever you measure, and the data scientist or the analyst of the team is usually responsible to guide the entire team on what should be the success metrics or the primary metrics, or the guardrail metrics, and what do you measure, and that's what the business would actually optimize for. So yeah, definitely. And then how do you move from there to build on MIS and dashboard and reporting for tracking? And then I want to focus a bit on the experimentation piece that you mentioned, because product companies in at least the last 5 years, because of the tremendous amount of data and the capabilities that Optimizely or some of the internal generated experimentation tools bring on, how important has it become to experiment and as a data scientist or an analytics professional, to know about experimentation and to also perform those?
I think that's a very loaded question. So let me try to break it down into two pieces. I think the first one is why experiment. I think that is an easy answer. The reason you experiment is because you have a hypothesis that you're trying to prove out. If you knew that launching a feature was going to result in um, like tremendous impact and it's the right thing for the customers, we don't really need to like run an experiment unless you want to like see the impact that it generated. But that's not the point of an experiment. The point of an experiment, in my opinion, should always be that you have a hypothesis around how your customers would behave when you add in a new feature or a new model or whatever is the change that you're trying to make, and you want to see how it impacts the metrics that you think it's going to impact. So the reason experimentation is important, in my opinion, is that it helps you figure out what your product strategy should be. For example, let's say that for the same push notifications example that we are talking about, let's say if we find out that push notifications are actually being disabled or people are actually uninstalling the app because of the amount of push notification the particular company is sending, through an experiment, if you can see how many people are uninstalling the app and what is the business impact on it in terms of revenue or daily active users, your product strategy changes. Your product strategy then becomes that how do we figure out what is the right amount of push notifications to send to a particular user? How do we optimize that? If that isn't an issue, your problem still remains that, okay, how can I generate different sorts of push notifications to keep users engaged with the push notifications? So experiments, even smaller or bigger, they tell you about the product strategy that you want your team to take, which is why I think experimentation is important. Your second question was like, what do we want? Like, what is the tooling or what is the, sorry, can you repeat what your second question
Yeah,
was?
so like why, so what sort of skills would be important from a data science perspective to know about experimentation and also perform them?
I think like there are a bunch of gotchas that come with experiments, right? Bias and variance of like bias, pre-existing bias, variance of the metrics that you're experimenting on. How do you do your statistical tests? What does p-value actually mean? What does it mean for something to be statistically significant? Why should we not peak? There are a bunch of statistical concepts that fall under the umbrella. When you work with execs or like product managers, they want to get early results and early reads always, and it's very important for a data scientist to be able to say, no, you gotta wait, the results are not valid yet. So again, there's this very nice paper that says, essentially, I think it's called the pitfalls of online experimentation or online large scale experiments. It's my go-to paper to read whenever I want to read up on experimentation and its pitfalls again. So I'll again send that to you so that we can share it with the group.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Again, one last question before we open up with all the Q&A. How has the transition from Uber to Reddit been, and where do you see like the similarities between different companies? So your quant role, roles in a product company, and now in a social media company.
I think the similarities are that you're trying to solve a business problem, right? And you got to be able to convert it into a statistical or an analytics problem. And you have to be able to communicate it back and like do good storytelling about the problem that you solved. The other similarity is that the core skill set sort of remains the same. You are still doing statistics, you're still doing modeling, machine learning. It's the same sort of skills. SQL, you still experimentation, you're still using the same set of skills that you have and trying to solve different problems. The thing that changes, I think I explained what changed from finance to Uber, but from Uber, which is a marketplace, to Reddit, which is a social media company, the thing that changes is how your customers react to features and how network effects uh, like happen in social media, right? Experimentation becomes very tricky to do when you're doing experimentation on a social media, because you can have various reactions that cannot even be measured. So causal inference becomes a little bit more important. But in general, I feel like you still need to have the same sort of metrics and measurement. You still need to be able to experiment rigorously, and you still trying to solve a business problem and communicate the solution to a user. So the similarities are there. There are more similarities than there are differences.
Got it. That makes sense. Thank you so much, Chinmay. I think it was a wonderful chat. So many interesting points. Let's open it up with questions. So, folks on the call, if you have any questions, please let us know. We already have a couple of questions. We can just begin by asking them. So, one of the questions that was asked is that somebody who is currently in a more analytics field, doing more MIS or reporting or just dealing with historical analysis. The question is how can they create those experiences or have that experience in a more modeling or applied data science role to get a role which is closer to data science or closer to core data science rather than just doing business analytics?
Yeah, it's tough. I'll preface by saying that this is tough, but it's not impossible. In the sense that there are two ways to do it. The first way is that if you can do it at your job. For example, if you are doing business, like if you're doing like simple dashboarding and analysis with the data, there's a very high likelihood that you understand that data better than anybody else, right? So because you understand the data better than anybody else, you have you have the ability to identify what are some interesting insights you can generate from the data, to be able to say that, okay, here's the business outcome of this analysis or of this model that will happen. For example, if you are dealing, I don't know if I'll be able to come up with a good example, but if you're dealing with, say, um, like user-based data, how users are using a particular platform, like what does the funnel look like for any sort of website or any sort of tool, right? An interesting way to approach that problem is, instead of looking at where users are dropping off, you start understanding what sort of users are dropping off at what area. So that can be modeled away as well, where you can model the propensity of a user dropping off given all the user features or given where the user is coming from. And then based on that, you can potentially give insights to your team to explain what impact would we make if we were to change this. So that's on the job. Off the job, I don't think there are better resources than Kaggle or DataCamp or all these various things. One interesting thing that I have also found is reading blogs of companies that do data science. I think Uber, Reddit, both of these companies have blogs, and so do a bunch of other social media, other tech companies around data science. And that'll tell you the sort of problems that they're trying to solve.
Yeah, I think terrific pointers on how exactly to stay updated. And I think on the question itself, nothing is stopping you from moving on or taking those sort of challenges. If you're already working in a company, you have access to data, you can perform any analysis that you want. If it makes sense and it improves the business, I think stakeholders would be more than willing to see your analysis on that. I think tech blogs, again, read as many tech blogs as you can, especially on experimentation, on statistical or causal inference, and all of those things. In India, I know Swiggy writes, or like the newer tech companies write a lot of blogs. So Flipkart tech blogs or Swiggy tech blogs are very, very interesting if you're in India. If you're here in the Silicon Valley, then there's no dearth of the amount of tech things that you can read upon. Great. One of the other questions is very interesting. The question is, does creativity help in a data science role? I think the answer to that is absolutely yes, in bold caps, in capital letters. Creativity is important. I'll let Chinmay answer on why it is important, and how can you implement creativity or show creativity in your data science role.
Yeah. when you say creativity, two things come to my mind. The first thing is that there are many different ways to solve a particular problem, right? One, there are creative ways to solve a problem which are oftentimes ingenious enough that they warrant doing them again and again and again. And some data scientists that I know, they explicitly try to move away from the methods that they already know so that they can try newer methods and learn more. So that's one aspect of creativity. The other aspect of creativity in data science comes from the domains, right? So a lot of data science is unique in the sense that you don't necessarily need to do a master's in statistics or a bachelor's in statistics or computer science to get into data science. There are so many people who are from history, psychology, linguistics, right? But all of them are trying at the end of the day trying to understand users using data. So there is a lot of different ways to do that, and a lot of creativity comes from working with a diverse and creative set of people that you're working with, in my opinion, to solve a particular problem.
Got it. Great. Yeah, these were some of the questions that we had. Any open questions in the live session that people want to ask? Drop in the chat or just probably unmute yourself and ask.
I
Any?
had a question. Maybe could answer. I think a lot of people face this concern that, like, while they're in the question that was asked, if they're doing in data analysis and they want to move into modeling, but the question, but the challenge that they face is every next opportunity asks for a prior experience in the same thing. So how do you address that?
That's a very tough question for me to answer because this is not only true for data science, it's true for like a lot of different areas in the industry right now where people keep asking for prior experience. The data science answer for me has always been doing projects in the field, right? If you are able to show that you're taking the initiative to solve a particular problem, right? That can tell potential companies and organizations who we have the ability to actually in this concept what do you
All right. Now I think people are not able to unmute themselves and then not able to ask questions. Bhargav, did you have a question? I think you can now unmute and ask.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you, like you said, you like to work in different fields and get experience, like want to be a generalist. So, say when you're coming from a field, you've been working in, say, NLP or computer vision for say 2 years, and now you want to work in a different field. How do you compete with others, or others who are either in the same industry or with new graduates who have been working in the labs and who have been working with the fancy stuff? So how do you distinguish yourself, and how do you say that my 2 years of experience is worth it even if it is a different field? You're
yeah,
able to get the question, right?
that's a very good question, Bobby. So, this is something that I struggle with personally, right? Like when you're trying to do something new, and you see there are people who are already experts in something, right? You automatically at least I automatically sort of try go into that zone where I'm like, okay, here are the skill sets that I don't have that I need to develop. But one of my skip level managers, he basically gave me this very interesting way of looking at this. The idea is that you have been in the industry for say 2 years in a particular field. There are strengths that you have that have made you successful in the area that you're working on, that the people that you're comparing yourself with or want to distinguish yourself from don't necessarily have. So the idea then becomes that of the skills that you picked up in say NLP or conversational AI or computer vision, how transferable are they? or how can you transfer them to a particular role that you're trying to go for? Like how can you highlight the strengths that you've had in your previous roles to show people that here is what I bring to the table, rather than saying that, okay, I am deficient in this, the other people are not, and I want to be like them, I want to learn and I want to do that. Learning can happen, improving your weaknesses can happen, but because you have experience, i'm I can guarantee that there are strengths that you bring to the role that other people cannot. Does that make sense, Bhargav?
All right, next question is from Vanna. Vanna, do you want to just ask your question? Okay, let me.
Hi, Chinmay. Vandana this side. So my question is that I was into market research, then I changed my profile to machine learning, now also doing deep learning. So when I go for interview, so they ask me, you don't know cloud and big data. So many multiple things they require. So now I was from non-IT background, now Python developer also. So I know machine learning or Python only as far as machine learning is concerned. So what should I like focus on now? So many things are there. Like what should I read? So much material,
Yeah,
deep learning, or like how should I?
I that's a to be honest, that's a tough question to answer, and that's just because data science in general is such a diverse field, right? Like you said, there are so many things to focus on, and if you're constantly trying to like learn newer things, how do you become better at what you are doing or what you want to be better at? So I unfortunately I don't have like very specific advice for this, but my take on this has always been that if there is a particular area that you enjoy working on, right, you can continue working on that area and becoming better at that, and find a job that lets you use that as a strength, and at the same time you try to learn all of the other things, because no one person is going to be able to learn all the skill sets for a job before they start the job, right? Like learning on the job is a thing, and I think companies are essentially most likely trying to look for, here's the strength that you're bringing to a particular role, and things that you can learn, you learn over time. I hope that sort of answers the question, but unfortunately, I don't have very specific advice.
Hey, right, do you want to ask your question?
Oh, hi. Sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, I want to thank you guys for coming and like giving us all these knowledge and experiences. I appreciate the time from both of you guys. I wanted to ask, like, if there are like specific challenges working with rideshare specifically for Uber. It was just kind of out of my curiosity, and would love to know input from both of you guys.
Right, so I think Utsav might be able to answer this better, because while I worked at Uber for 4.5 years, I never technically worked on rides. Like I was part of a customer support platform team, and then I was part of Uber Eats, which is a three-sided marketplace. So I think the big challenges, technical challenges, that I enjoyed in my time at Uber Eats were the three-sided marketplace challenges. Right, there is effects that eat like customers who are ordering food have on couriers that are delivering food, have on restaurants that are delivering or like serving the food, right? So you have to ensure that when you're measuring a particular experiment, how do you like if you're running an experiment for the customers, right, how do you make sure that you are not in any way spoiling the experience for the drivers who are delivering the food, as well as the restaurants that are on the platform. I think that was personally a big technical challenge for me. But Utsav, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think three-sided marketplace is more complex than a two-sided marketplace. But like when Uber is starting out, is first or one of the first companies doing ride sharing. which means that you're making the market, which means you're defining the problems, which means you're defining search pricing, you're doing a lot of analytics or experimentation and pricing related things. How do you essentially balance the supply and demand? That's one of the challenges that we worked on. When I was in the India team, we worked on are the driver payouts based on luck or skill? If they're based more on luck versus skill, can we sort of make sure that everyone earns at least the minimum wages when they are on the platform? And these are complicated business problems, and they're more complicated from a data science perspective. So yeah, very, very interesting problems that we got to solve in ride sharing. All right, last question. I think we had from Kishore Aditya was any tech stack that you would like to recommend to people starting out? Would it matter what language or tool we start out with?
I think in certain cases it does matter what tool. Like for example, SQL in my opinion is a skill that every data scientist or analyst needs to have. And there are different versions of SQL, but that's just syntax, and the idea remains the same. So with SQL, I think it does matter that you know that tool. But in terms of, say, the debate in terms of R versus Python versus SAS, SPSS, I feel like whatever helps you solve the problem is good enough. I think companies appreciate problem solving more than the tech stack that you're using. For example, I have in some occasions used Google Sheets and Excel to solve problems, and that works fine as long as you're trying to solve the problems. I don't necessarily think that it's important to pick a side in terms of R versus Python, but it's important to know the strengths of both these languages. Start with any one of them, and as you move ahead in your career, you'll get exposures to people who are working with other languages and then try to learn from them.
Yep, true that. All right, I think it's a wrap from us. Thank you so much again, everyone, for joining. And especially to Chinmay, thank you so much for taking the time out to do this. I think it was extremely important and very essential to know about the entire journey that you've had, and the kind of experiences that you shared with us today. Thank you again so much. Quick pointer. So this is a mentorship session organized by CareerNub, which helps early stage professionals like everyone in the audience and also us. And we try and pair them up with different mentors in their own field who want to learn more about things, about career guidance, probably mock interview preparations, or just MS or MS in statistics or data science or all of those questions. So feel free to drop in a email at hello@careernub.com. We'll just paste that in the chat below. And you can drop in with a subject line saying DS mentorship or one-on-one DS mentorship, and we would be extremely happy to pair you up with a mentor. If Chinmay has bandwidth, he'll take on that, or we can find other mentors for you. All right, thank you everyone. Have a great night or day wherever you're joining it from. Bye.